I'm really pleased to be having a conversation with Mike Rayburn. And it's really a privilege, Mike, to be with you today because Mike has been in the Hall of Fame of speakers in the United States. He's headlined the Carnegie Hall three times, is a tremendous comedian and a tremendous entertainer. But I've also grown to know him as a real human being. So we're having a conversation about the future.
Right.
And really kind of what's going on in the world. So everything from climate change to Donald Trump, I think it's sort of the table conversation, like what the heck is going on. And you've spoken in front of some of the top leaders in government and business, and I think you might have an interesting perspective as an artist on kind of how the world looks to you and what's going on. And then I want to interact with you and share a little bit about what I'm seeing.
Sure.
Let's see if what we can imagine or create or learn together.
I think that's great.
Yeah.
I would love to do that. Let's get started.
Good. So what do you think's going on? Anything general, or is it?
Well, I liked the paradigms that you were talking about with increasing complexity and the need to change, and I see that happening right now. I see that the individual is having to sort of in a conscious way change or evolve or improve, if you will, because the world will leave you if you don't. I find this for myself. Every time I get used to a certain way a program works on the computer, they change it, and I'm going, "Why did you change it? I just got it." But if you take that as just a microcosm, as an analogy for everything, that's what's happening. And so I see. The number one. Absolutely every single client that I have, corporations, associations, organizations, will say, we're trying to manage change. We're trying to manage change. And right away, that concept tells me there's something wrong because Peter Drucker said managing change is not only stupid, it's dangerous. The only way to manage change is to create change, which I know you get. And so that's why they bring me in, is because I'm trying to, they're recognizing that need, and so I'm sort of giving them some tools to do that.
Yeah, I think Mike, when I think about it, that most people relate to change as something that happens out there or happens to them.
Right.
And usually the best you can do is try to cope with it, maybe keep up with it. But like Drucker said, I agree. It's the only way to make any sense of it is to create change, particularly when things are moving faster and faster.
Right.
Because I've been taking the idea of accelerating change and increasing complexity, maybe loss of control, unpredictability, and I'm sort of imagining it as the way computers were in the early days, when it was mostly about reporting. And as computers got faster and faster, the gap between inputs and outputs got smaller and smaller.
Right.
So today I'm imagining the gap between the past and the future is getting smaller and smaller. And I'm calling that a real-time world, just like we used to talk about real-time computing. But it's interesting because the metaphor that I'm using to try to think this through myself is surfing. And I know you're interested in surfing, but
just now learning.
It's kind of like history is emerging in front of us like a wave. And the past is disappearing behind us, and so that as a kind of metaphor for how do we learn to live and how do we navigate, it seems to be surfing is a pretty good metaphor. But it also strikes me that's sort of a lot about how entertainers live their life. In a way, they have to be really on the edge of their competency in their field and their art all the time.
Right. There's two things I think of with that. First of all, with surfing, the interesting point of that metaphor is to catch that wave, the wave that is coming at you that we all know is coming. We may not know what it looks like, how big or small it is, but we know it's there. But the only way to catch that is to start paddling before it's there.
Oh, that's interesting, yes.
Okay, so every surfer has to start and get the momentum going so that by the time it hits, they're ready to steer and control based on that change rather than...
Well, that's interesting because I've been using a parallel idea when I talk about leadership. That one of the key qualities of leadership is the ability to commit before to a possibility before there's any evidence that it's possible.
Absolutely. I call that right music that you can't play.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. And if you could imagine then that creating reality is about writing music that you can't play and then learning to play on the way.
Yes.
Yeah,
that's exactly right. I totally agree with you. And The other thing I'm interested in what you, because you've said one of the things was a loss of control, and I get that in general, but I think with the iPhone and with the number of different things that are happening, change technologically, but other ways as well. In some ways, don't we have a little bit more control? Or
well, I make a distinction between control and mastery, I guess. To me, mastery is moving with the reality and using reality as part of the natural resource or the raw material for creating the future. Control to me is performing action on reality. It's trying to get reality to do what you want and exerting some kind of force. But I also have this idea that only the individual can make a commitment.
Okay.
But individuals can fulfill their commitments without other people.
Okay.
And so therefore I see that what's beginning to occur is that we're realizing that we don't really have individual control. But we might be able to anticipate what's occurring in a way that we could mobilize our relationships and our commitments in a way maybe what you're calling paddle faster. To be able to not be able to predict what's going to happen, but be able to have enough sensibility for what's going on and be a present enough observer that we can then begin to anticipate. And that would be the signal to paddle faster, I think.
Right. Yeah. And I think, I've got a friend named Dan Burris who's a technology futurist. And when I hear him talk about some of the predictors, some of the things that we can see that we can know are coming, and things that we can probably guess are coming, maybe not definite, but probable. I'm surprised at the level to which we can predict certain things if we'll pay attention to them. And I think a lot of it is a study of attention. When our attention is here and there's these other things going on, if we would open up the attention and pay attention to what a lot of us could see what's going on.
That's what I'm calling anticipate. Yeah,
there you go.
Exactly right. Yeah, I think that's the key. And I think that if you relate that to the way most people approach things, they're trying to figure it out.
Right.
Or they're looking at reality as a problem that we have to solve.
Exactly, which is static.
Yes.
As opposed to this is an ongoing thing, so we need to look at it in more of a fluid sensibility.
Yeah, could you talk a little bit more about this idea of writing music that you don't know how to play, and how that relates to something I know you and I share, which is this interest in what if and what's possible.
Right.
This theme of these conversations is called possible futures.
Right.
And I always make a distinction between the predictable future, which is basically an extension of the past.
Right.
And then the possible future, which is something that comes out of human imagination, passion, dreaming, and perhaps the question that sort of you built your career on, which is what if.
Exactly. Well, and that's exciting. Write music you can't play. That it's what I did. It's just what I did naturally. I would say I want to do that, and I didn't know how to do that, but I knew what it was, and so then I set about trying. Most people, again, in that sort of limited view, and I'm not putting people down by that. I mean, it's just their circumstance. They set goals or objectives or where they want to go based on what's possible, based on what they see or have seen. And so, or stepwise motion, like we'll set a goal for a 5% increase this year and another 5% increase next year.
Continuous improvement.
Exactly. And that's not wrong, but I try to add something to the conversation and say, try this. Set a goal where you don't know how, but you know what. I always tell people, when you set a goal, don't start with what's possible. Start with what's cool. What's right? What would be the dream case? Okay, what's exciting for you, and set that as the goal. And because people always say, well, gosh, in a perfect world I would, and I say, in a perfect world you would what? And why is that not the goal? And they say, oh, well, because it's impossible, and they kill it as it comes out of their mouth. Drives me crazy. That's why I do this. And so, I ask people to do that because that's what moves us forward.
Well, here's a what if for you, because the way you're talking about goals and moving forward, one of the things I've noticed that most people, and maybe our whole culture, is predicated on the idea that the past is determining the present, and we're sort of moving like an arrow through time to a point at some point in the future.
Okay.
And even the way we use the word goal. I have this idea that dreams are not places we get to, they're places we come from. And that even vision is the future as a possibility, but it's not a goal. It's a kind of ground of being to come from, so we're trying to manifest our vision or try to manifest our future.
Okay.
And the thought I'm having is that what if our behavior and our action is not being organized by the past, but is being organized by the future? That what if what our behavior is about how we see the future, and if we see the future as predictable and narrow and small, then we'll have a certain set of actions and behaviors available.
That's a great point.
And if we see the future as open and full of possibility, then we have a much wider range of choices and actions that we can take. So I'm playing from the game that maybe our thinking around causality is all screwed up. That we think that everything has a cause that's before.
Right.
But at the same token, most people can't tell the difference between causes and effects, because every cause is a prior effect and every effect is a prior cause.
Right.
So what if you don't really have a lot of choice about what's going on in the moment, but you always have a choice about how the future occurs? And if you're committed to those possibilities and committed to your dreams, then in fact those possibilities become the playing field for day-to-day action.
That's great. And what I would say is that, first of all, what I think you're right, and I think that what it requires is a mindset change.
Exactly.
Okay, because that is it's a future mindset. It is it's a possibility mindset.
Exactly.
And I'm interesting. Just my thoughts. Sitting around, just things I ponder recently. It hit me that imagination is, other than opposable thumbs, the things that sets us apart from animals. So it's what defines us as humans, yet it's what makes us most godlike or godly. Because I see God as being infinite imagination. I mean, the creator, as in like creating everything. And so our imagination is about the future, is about possibilities. It's not about, it may have some root in, for instance, I think in terms, I imagine musically, because I was born with a musical ability. I was not born with a particular scientific ability, so I was not Elon Musk trying to figure out how to colonize Mars. Mm-hmm. Okay, so it had some effect there with what I just as an individual bring to the table. But I think imaginatively in music or in comedy or in entertainment or in the things that we're talking about, because that was what is sort of in me. So by the same token, it was there regardless, but it's a mindset that says I'm going to focus, or I'm going to look at the future as a possibility, the future as open, rather than something that's dictated from before.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Well, this last idea was probably the setup for a much longer conversation, but you just triggered a thought in me,
okay,
which is when you talk about imagination,
right,
and I always am trying to think about how do I teach things that I'm interested in. So if I want to teach people to have an imagination, mm-hmm, or if I want to help cultivate imagination, one of the things I might consider is that maybe the idea that imagination is something that happens inside my head is not quite accurate. That it's something that really happens in the intersection between me and someone else, or me
okay,
and lots of other people. That it's at the intersection of human beings where our differences can both collide and also interact and to merge in a way that can give birth to something new, which is what I think we talk about when we talk about imagination. It's how do we use our differences to create new things and new possibilities, rather than necessarily try to keep homogenizing our point of view into some form of agreement.
Right, and then what that brings to mind, because I hadn't thought in what I thought. Well, I'll say it in a second, but as pertains to how someone else affects that in imagination, that's what gives birth to community.
Exactly.
So, and because I believe at the root, at the foundation of imagination is love.
I do too. That's beautiful.
Okay, and so with someone else, that creates community. The other thing that I was going to say is that is within the individual. I think that imagination is not just mind. You said that it's mind is part of it, but it's really more mind and heart. Yeah. Okay, the internal, because I don't tend to imagine a lot about things I'm not passionate about, and that's where your heart comes in.
Yeah.
Or things that bother me about the world, that's your heart. Things that I feel joyful about, or I feel upset about, or I feel like heartbroken about. Those, and it causes the fusing of the coming together of the.
Well, now you've even pointed to something more interesting, which is that maybe the mind and heart is more like the receiver rather than the sender, and that perhaps there's an abundance of possibilities that we aren't even imagining today. But if we're open, if our heart is open and our mind is tuned, and we're paying attention, and we are focused on possibilities, then we're more likely to have those aha moments and get those insights that could really open up all kinds of futures for not just ourselves, but our friends and our loved ones and our communities.
Right. Well, and that's where I think you said from outside. I totally agree, and it's been said that, and I completely agree with this, that creativity, inspiration, possibilities don't come from you so much as through you.
Oh, yes.
Okay, so it's from somewhere. I call it God. Call it whatever you want to. And so it comes through you, and so it's more. And this is again going back to what we talked about in the beginning: an open idea, because that you need to be open to that. And openness is actually, interestingly, I read Aaron Copland, a great composer, said inspiration may be a form of the superconscious or of the subconscious. I wouldn't know. He said, but it is the antithesis of self-consciousness. So when we're self-conscious, oh no, what do people think? What me? It just kills everything.
Yes.
But when we have that openness, that lack of the letting go of the self, not forfeiting the self, but letting go, opening the self, that's when we can kind of get into that space. And I think that brings it around. Maybe I'm wrong here, but the whole concept of possibilities, the whole concept of the future shaping what's going on, is requires a level of. It comes back to that openness, a letting go of the self.
Yes, I think exactly. I'll give you one other thought here that we'll play with a little bit. I have this notion that who we are is our relationships. For example, I see myself as my relationship with my little voice, my internal conversation.
Okay.
I see my relationship with you and other people. I see my relationship with circumstances. I can see my relationship with time. And I can see my relationship with whatever is beyond comprehension, God, spirit, universe, whatever we wish to say is beyond our thinking.
Right.
And so those 5 relationships, in my experience, define me. That is to say, if you take away any of those relationships, I think I disappear. I can't imagine existing independent of those 5 relationships. And what that allows me to do is begin to see that whatever's going on in the world, I don't always have a control over it.
Right.
But I always have a choice in how I relate to it.
Right.
So I don't control the circumstances, but I always know how I relate to the circumstances.
Right.
And transformation, from my point of view, has more to do with changing ourselves and how we relate to all of that,
Right.
as opposed to necessarily trying to control it and fix it and change it.
Right. That's what the good self-help books are about. About changing those relationships with time, with circumstance, with, you can't change what happens, but you change how you respond to it.
Well, last question then. Let me ask you this: as an entertainer, when you're talking to thousands of people, how do you hold, I guess, the relationship between the audience and yourself, and how does that relationship affect your performance, as well as get that ego out of the way?
Wow, that's a great question, and I mean, back up. I consider playing guitar as an art form, comedy as an art form. My speaking, the content, the things that what if, and writing music you can't play, that's an art form. There is a separate art form to entertaining an audience, or that's one term, or connecting with an audience. And that's what I feel like my art form is. That's what I do best. However I do it, that's what I do. And so the audience affects, I hope this is answering your question, but it affects everything with me. I know plenty of people who simply play music on stage or simply regurgitate thoughts, ideas on stage. And there are others who connect and are in the moment. And that's when you can go to something that's new or different, even with the same material. You can get to a different place with it. New things come out. I always want to record what I do because that's what my best writing is on stage. You know, in fact, the funniest jokes I've ever written, I've forgotten because they weren't recorded.
I have that same experience in workshops all the time.
Yeah. You get in the moment and you're there, and
that
boom.
was really good. I just can't quite remember what it was.
Yeah. And for me, this is where the rubber meets the road. It's where, because I love concepts and ideas and thinking through them, but I always want to see, okay, so how does this apply? How does this change my life when I leave here, when I drive home? And for me, all of these points, they feed in and they become this, I talk with my clients beforehand. And I get their needs and their ideas and their things that their messaging and whatever. And then I know what I do. And then I just kind of let it be. And when I'm on stage, things will come out. Just this last presentation I did, last keynote I did, I talk about asking what if and creativity and possibility thinking and it came out on stage, and it's a whole thing I'm running with, was granting people the freedom to be wrong. Because it's similar to the freedom to fail, but the freedom to be wrong, because when we punish being wrong, we can't ever come up with anything.
And then just they get defensive, and then it's really closes down. That's great.
And the point is that came out on stage. That wasn't just me, and it wasn't just the audience. It was something that came out of that meeting.
Magical connection.
Right. And so that's everything.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Mike, I can't tell you how much I appreciate your taking the time. I know you were up early this morning and you came all this way, and here we are having this conversation. But I'll very much look forward to having another one. And thank you so much for being a part of Possible Futures.
Well, thank you. This has been fantastic.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Carnegie Hall headliner Mike Rayburn.
My passion is that I believe that we are each capable of far more than we ever knew was possible. I believe that we're each literally a gold mine of unrealized potential. Managing change is not only stupid, it's dangerous. The only way to manage change is to create change. To change anything, the first thing that has to change is our brains, the way we think. Your thinking that got you where you are sitting right now with whatever levels of success you have already achieved, that thinking will not get you any further. What if? What if? When you ask the question, what if, in a positive way, you open up the possibilities, just by definition. What if we could do that? What would it look like? To do things you've never done, you've got to start by doing things you've never done. I mean, I'm self-taught, right? We get proud of that. I'm self-taught, The problem with being self-taught is the teacher's not that good. I use that question, what if, to write a Christmas song for my friend Philippe upon hearing the results of his paternity test. Philippe's not a dad. Philippe's not a dad. I just took the songs that I do know and I played them country. Who let the dogs out? Who? The apple-bottom jeans and the boots with the fur. The whole club was looking at her. She hit the floor. Next thing you know, shawty got low, 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 low. This is Dr. Seuss as performed by Led Zeppelin. Do not like green eggs and ham. I do not like them, Sam. I am. I've only got brains. He's got the brawn, but in 10 years he'll be mowing my lawn. If you could see that